Good evening, wherever you are in the world today. We have attendees from basically all over the world, so it's very exciting. Welcome to this, our second Capex lightning round of the spring season. We very much appreciate that you've chosen to carve time in your day to be here. We know you have a lot of choices you can make when it comes to webinars and educational events, so thank you very much. For those new to this series, our objective with these events is quite simple. It's a hybrid format in which we can succinctly and quickly provide insights and ideas that we hope you can put to use right away. Today's session is a special one as it celebrates our newly announced relationship with the Hackett Group, which we're super excited about, and features its very own Vince Griffin. More about him in a minute. But first, a quick side notes. The webinar will last approximately 30 to 40 minutes. If you have any questions, please please ask them using the Q&A button, which you'll find to the right of your screen. And if you'd like to view the webinar in full screen, as we recommend you do, because it makes it easier to see, particularly when we're on slides that have a fair amount of copy on them, click the bracket icon in the right-hand corner of the presentation window, and it works quite well. So all set, let's go. So here's today's agenda. We'll provide a one-slide overview of Finario for those who are new to our events. Then I'll share a rapid-fire review of trending topics that we believe are worth keeping an eye on, and that's about 5-6 minutes. Then that'll be followed by Vince for our discussion of what is benchmarking and how you can leverage it to your advantage. I think it's quite timely a topic. And then lastly, Finario's very own Joe Corwin will quickly show you 5 ways that Capex stakeholders can put benchmarking theory into practice using a platform like ours. So here's our one-slide intro to Finario. Finario is the leading enterprise Capex software solution that connects your people, your projects, and your systems for an accurate view of all capital project activity and options. We're the only solution that covers the full Capex lifecycle, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, from sandbox ideation through the entirety of the planning and budgeting processes, dynamically automated request and approval workflow, project forecasting, and post-completion reviews. The last of those, post-completion reviews, by the way, is a topic we get a ton of questions and interest in. We integrate with your ERP, whether it's SAP, Oracle, JD Edwards, or other system, as well as a host of other solutions like OneStream, Kyriba, and Procore. And many of the best companies around the globe, such as these that you see here, the logos that you see here, are Finario users. We're in 70 plus countries across more than 30 industries. And at any given moment, we have billions of dollars, euros, and yen being managed in our system. So that's the super quick summary. And now on to the rapid fire summary of trending topics. Today, businesses must take depreciation deductions over long periods of time, which reduces the value of those deductions, which is why, and it actually just made news this morning, there was great interest after the recent State of the Union address here in the States when a new provision was floated that would allow companies to immediately deduct and delay the cost of qualifying assets in the year that they are placed in service, which, if you think about it, would be super valuable in providing tax savings and spur additional investments as a result. Unfortunately, as of this morning, the current bill now making its way through Congress is falling short. Among the provisions, it temporarily restores 100% bonus depreciation for short-lived investments from 2025 through 29, and temporarily provides 100% expensing of qualifying structures for which construction begins before the end of 2028 and are placed in service before the end of 2032. Net-net, We'll be watching this one closely as the bill goes to Senate, and you should too, because 100% bonus depreciation would free up a lot of capital in theory to invest in other places. Two, many CFOs that we are talking to nowadays are carefully evaluating how much price elasticity they can pass onto consumers and businesses without materially impacting demand. This is particularly true in industries that have very tight margins or significant dependence on overseas supply chains. You're seeing this a lot, particularly in the retail sector, as you've probably been reading in the news with retailers like Walmart and Target. Three, we're seeing the use of digital twins gaining steam, as we're hearing from our customers who are in the operations and engineering side of the house. These are digital replicas of large-scale investments that can receive data from their physical counterparts. And now, with improved AI models, are better able to simulate project outcomes, optimize asset performance, and stress test scenarios before execution. So that's something we expect to see even more momentum. Number four, there have been scattered reports of companies consulting the crypto-based prediction markets for guidance on geopolitics and even consumer demand. And so I would say to all you folks, this can be very informative, but also incredibly dangerous, at least as of now, because it's unclear really to what extent whales, or the largest investors as they are called, are manipulating these markets. Five, the Financial Times has reported that private credit is now emerging as a pivotal financier for capital expenditures, particularly in industries that have data centers and reshoring industries. This trend has private credit transitioning from traditional mid-market lending to major Capex projects. Six, a European Commission is now studying the integration of EU capital markets and seeking feedback on potential obstacles. They're expected to be done with this work mid-June, and its outcome, it's presumed, could influence cross-border investment strategies and regulatory frameworks. So definitely something to keep an eye on if you do business in Europe. Seven, many operations leaders are now tasked with evaluating the trade-offs between flexibility, control, and capital lockup as they consider a potential shift to asset-light strategies. As not surprisingly, this reflects a deeper scrutiny of the total cost of ownership versus short-term Capex outlay as companies face continued macroeconomic uncertainty. It's that dreaded tariff word. And then lastly, number eight, with capital being tighter, companies are forming or strengthening their Capex councils, also called capital review committees, where finance, operations, and sometimes procurement and/or IT must align before funding approvals. This is something we here at Finario have been covering at great length and will continue to do so. And in fact, it'll be a topic at our June lightning round on ridding your organization of capital planning bad habits. More on that later. So that's your May rapid fire review. We do this during every Capex lightning round, and hopefully you find it useful and informative. So let's now talk about benchmarking, which is a good habit, with our featured speaker. Vince, welcome.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much for having me on today.
You're very welcome. Just for those in the audience, Vince is having some trouble with his camera, so you'll have to look at his lovely picture on the screen and imagine him talking. In any case, it's great to have you here. We're super excited to be working with you and your amazing colleagues at the Hackett Group. It's been awesome. By way of introduction, Vince leads Hackett's global finance advisory practice. He served as advisor to CFOs and their teams at Fortune 500 and mid-sized companies worldwide. Moreover, he's co-founder of a publicly traded specialty finance company, has been a corporate strategy and development executive, and has served as a CFO. Did I catch everything, Vince? That sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, that pretty much covers it. Done a lot of interesting and different stuff along the way. So,
Excellent. Well, I'm going to cede the floor to you now, and Vince is going to take us through some thoughts and theories around benchmarking. So I hand it off to you.
great. Thanks so much, Rich. And meanwhile, that's quite the backdrop in terms of the
Hmm.
environment that we all find ourselves operating in. A lot of regulatory, a lot of governance issues, and the like that we're dealing with, which really does lend itself to giving us a moment to. Assess where we are, to benchmark where we are, and before we dive further, let's just maybe level set a bit on what it is just benchmarking means. And I'm sure a lot of you know and understand, but I think it's good to set some context when we talk about benchmarking. It's a standard that we can judge ourselves from. It's just the most common, the good old gold standard from a monetary standpoint. It is that point of reference where we can stake where we are in terms of our progress. It's also a basis for evaluation or comparison. How do we lay up against others in terms of performance? And when we call that benchmark and set that mark, it seems pretty simple, but when we think about the comparisons that we want to make, there are some underlying challenges and characteristics of benchmarking. So we're talking about external benchmarking or internal benchmarking. Those lend itself to different types of questions. So what is it we talk about at Hackett? When we talk about a benchmark itself, it's important to understand what it is and what it is not when we're talking about company performance, right? So first and foremost, it's a starting point from us in terms of what it is. It's not our endpoint or a destination. It gives us a sense of where we are today. It also allows us to understand the gaps. Where are the areas of focus that we should be aligning our activities towards? Helps us level set against best practice from a process standpoint. It is largely for us in the benchmarking work that we do in Hackett, a process-based comparison as well as numeric. And also keep in mind, it's only one input. There are a series of strategies and directives that we have as organizations that lead us to our North Star. What a benchmark is not. Keep all these in mind. Like I said before, it's not the end answer. It's also not that detailed roadmap for redesign. It is giving us some context around where we are. It's also not necessarily a competitive analysis. Even when we do external benchmarking, it is hard to get an apples to apples comparison because all organizations are a bit different. So we have to keep that in mind, which leads to the point of it's not an exact match for each organization. We're all a little bit different around the edges. Again, it's not the only input for us for decision making and understanding our performance. And it's also not going to cover everything within the organization. There are pieces and parts of the company that we can point to, but it is not a holistic view. So, just a bit of level setting with respect to what a benchmark is and what it is not. And so as we think about that, and why we want to benchmark, where's the value? What is it that we want to be able to bring to the table and have some understanding? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, first and foremost, what we get from it is that performance visibility. We do understand how our capex metrics will compare against our peer set. We want to be careful about the peer set that we set for ourselves, but it will allow us to see how we stack up. Um, get a lot of questions around this also when we talk about external benchmarking. Where do we get that information? Unless there's publicly available information, it's pretty hard to get that data. You really are a bit reliant upon organizations like us at Hackett or others that are able to have organizations submit metrics, submit data, and are willing to share with others, mostly anonymized, in order to make those types of comparison. But gives us a sense of where our performance is. It also drives insights for us around our projects. Internal benchmarking comes to mind here, where we can compare by division or by region to understand, who's doing what better than others. What are the best practices that we can extract? The competitive analysis piece, and kind of mentioned this before, strategic gaps that we might see with others. Dropping to the bottom, budget optimization and strategic alignment. Um, Given the level of uncertainty that's in marketplaces now, we as an advisory team are spending a large amount of our time with our clients around strategic alignment and budget repositioning, giving volatility, uncertainty. Where does our next dollar? Where is it best invested next? So that holistic view of investment. Moving to the center bottom, the governance and accountability piece. We need to have a rigorous process in order to drive the best outcomes here. So as we compare our process to others, where do we stack up? Do we have the right people involved in the right types of decisions? Are we making the decisions quickly enough here? There. And then lastly, from a risk mitigation standpoint, as we think about our process, are we designed and aligned towards sensing risk quickly? Are we able to make decisions so that we can pull the plug or push more chips to the center of the table on investments that we find more attractive? Do we have a system that allows us to fail fast? Also, so we can move on to what is next best for us. So a bit of context on that for us, just in general, in terms of strategy. More importantly, what are those metrics that we are most often seeing with respect to Capex? So called out six core metrics that are really, I think, most critical to Capex. Starting at the top right, NPV versus PI, kind of standard measures here, present value of our cash flows, and looking at those cash flows over that initial investment. Absolutely looking at that as a great financial metric. That ties, I think, very well into the second piece in terms of hurdle rates. Most often, weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, is our barometer there. See a lot of organizations will use that as a backdrop against the types of investments that they're making beyond just NPV or even ROIC that we see at the bottom left in point number 4, just to ensure that from an enterprise standpoint, our performance on these projects is being accretive to value creation. We do a lot of work in the benchmarking area in terms of process. So days to approval, and point number 3 is a key benchmark that we look at. Have a client right now where we've just finished a large benchmarking exercise across several areas of the finance function. Large oil and gas company, and days to approval, not only in Capex, but in certain other areas of finance for them, audit and forecasting and so forth there, where there's room for improvement from a day standpoint. So a key piece there, I mean, being faster, more nimble, and in today's environment is obviously something that would be beneficial for organizations. Mentioned ROIC before. Key measure, part and parcel to a ton of the work that we do in finance, not only Capex, but really just across the horn. Definitely a metric that is front and center that we see. Last couple of ones get into a more process and efficiency. Percent projects overrun. How do we do, right? As we take a look at our projects and project performance, do we hit it on time? Were we on budget? Under? Did we underperform or overperform? Rare that we see that happen, but it's always not nice when we do. But our ability to hit the mark is something that that we also want to have some context around. And then lastly, forecast accuracy range. Another sort of efficiency metric. This is another area that working with a large uh, contractor, infrastructure contractor, global contractor, and again, not only in areas of capex forecasting, but even cash flow forecasting and overall performance forecasting, where the types of decisions that they have to make in this uncertain environment, where they've got to buy steel, they've got to make capex decisions on equipment buys for both current contract and contract backlog fulfillment, being able to be accurate in those types of and the types of investments and forecasts that they're making is absolutely key to them. Um, See a question come up here on the screen. We try to cover off on this with so much focus on intelligence and AI focused capabilities. How do you see business calculating ROIC for such investments? Besides risks, it's very difficult to quantify. Yes, absolutely. Great question, and one that we're having some wide-ranging conversations on in Atlanta over the last few days. We at Hackett, we do an advisory leadership forum with our clients every spring. Part and parcel to some of those sessions was AI. And one of the groups that we led was around enterprise performance management and the use of AI and determinants of success in AI projects. And really, you know, it starts with a bit of understanding where you're going to deploy AI, what the purpose is. So AI, and particularly generative AI, agentic AI, is all about process, right? So if we break down the pieces and parts of an overall process and decide I want to deploy agentic AI in these very specific pieces of process, that leads us to what's the appropriate type of metric that I should be looking to from an ROI standpoint. So, you know, to your point, it is difficult beyond thinking about risks and talent and reductions or repositioning. If you look at it at too broad of a level, where we see most folks looking for the types of returns are in things like efficiency measures, or from a talent standpoint, freeing up time to reposition folks to spend more time on analytics rather than a process that we have now moved on something that has become more automated. So, you know, when it comes to determining what's the proper ROI, be very specific. You know, you got to be a little bit of your own special snowflake here in terms of what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Let that guide you to the appropriate metric rather than trying to think of a metric and applying it to where you might want to deploy AI. So, see another question here would be publicly available tool that can help in a publicly available tool in forecasting. From a publicly available standpoint, you know, I tell you, from here at Hackett, we gather a lot of information from a company like FactSet that gathers data from public companies where you can go in and slice and dice and capture a lot of information there. So that would be my recommendation on getting financial information. Um, Metrics, right? So we pivot back to our presentation. Metrics are great. They're good for us to focus on. We'd like to see those outcomes, but the outcomes are driven by the process that we use. So, in order to have excellence in process to drive those good outcomes, we need to have some consistency and standardization in the toolkit that we use. So, four kind of key points for you to keep in mind. First, how we get after this, the submissions that we use. We need a standardized way of initiating a project through a template, through a system, whatever the case may be. We need to be identifying who's accountable, who owns it, what area, what division, and the like here. We need to have the story behind each of these potential investments. What are the qualitative and quantitative type of measures that we're looking for, and the potential impact that it has on the company. The system that we use here should be project management based, a link to that, structured in a way that it's user friendly. Hint, hint. Systems that are out there, companies like Finerio, that allow you to do this. Um, the next piece, the business case, right? We've got to make sure that we are all going to use a standardized view of what good looks like. Does success mean for us? Is ROI our measure? Is it IRR? Do we use Rayrock? Whatever the case may be, we got to draw that line in the sand as to how we are going to measure performance here. If we're going to vary across that, things like risk-adjusted returns, thinking about hurdle rates, what's the right way to do that? What is our methodology? How do we think about risk and the types of tweaks that we might make from our return expectations there? That leads into risk assessments within the modeling that we do. Um, when we think about the implementation review and stage gated analyses, this is so incredibly important now, particularly in the levels of uncertainty that we have. We've got to have a standardized reporting process and a standardized set of goals and triggers along the way that we evaluate the investments that we're making so that we can course correct. So stage gating, standard reviews along the way, that continuous feedback look as we're deploying capital and finishing a project, so important. But huge for us is that postmortem, right? A lot of us, and a lot of the work that we do from an advisory standpoint, not enough of us spend enough time in the postmortem review to understand if we did something great, what were the success factors here, and how do we feed that back to ensure success going forward. And if it didn't go so well, why? What are the tweaks that we need to make either in process, or is it something in our model? What do we miss along the way? Key piece of that staging. And then lastly, here, key to any project, just a great RACI framework, really understanding who's responsible for what's the process flow here. A great graphic just to let people know and understand where we are in the process, who's got ownership for it. Just puts good old fashioned strong governance in place for us there. So good hygiene with respect to process. And as we think about that from a process standpoint, it's very specific, I think, at the capex level. But more importantly, as we think about the investments that get fed through that process, there's got to be some strategy behind it, and really at that enterprise level. And what shown here are some common and key elements of a strategic capital allocation alignment, a process or structure. Won't walk through all of these. I think they're relatively self-explanatory, but things like being efficient in process, liquidity optimization, the ability to mobilize capital in the places where we have best opportunity, looking for those ways to use a digital, AI, even in fact, to help accelerate our process. If I look at the top left in today's uncertainty, things like environmental adaptation, our ability to be agile here and sense where the market is moving so that we can move dollars either away from or to the types of opportunities that are most aligned towards driving opportunity and returns for us. Growth equilibrium. This really gets to the point of balancing cost reduction and efficiencies to growth opportunities. We've seen in research time and again where companies that are making large scale investments in times of uncertainty, we see now, drive outsized returns at the enterprise level versus peers. So being able to sense and move where those particular investments lie and generate the ability to deploy that capital gives you long-term enterprise value creation capabilities there. So a few of those strategic alignment pieces. All righty. So we talked about the process, maybe to bring it all together, a good visual, maybe to take it all away. And I just mentioned that it starts with a bit of an enterprise view here. This is kind of a typical capital management practice that is a bit dynamic. Starts with that strategic plan at the enterprise level. Where we all hold hands and say, "Hey, here's the direction we're taking the company." That leads to the types of target setting that we want to have that is going to flow into the very specific projects that we have across the organization. Segmenting by geography, by product line, whatever the case may be, whatever is specific for your organization. But then that's where the process really comes into play. This is where we start again with what's our first and foremost our basis of evaluation. Is it dollar value? What's our risk tolerance? Organizational impact? What are those key feeders to how we evaluate the project? And that might lead us to saying, okay, we got to really dive deep on this. This requires a full scale investigation, or it might be something that is pretty quick, pretty easy, so we can run it through a decision process pretty quickly. And then you can see the gating that I had mentioned before. These are the opportunities for us to review the project. Where are we? Are we on time? Are we under budget, over budget, whatever the case may be? These are the opportunities to course correct as we move along. And then at the very end, harped on this, the postmortem, so important for us to do. We learn so much from our failures, more so I think than our successes. So please take the necessary time to deconstruct and really understand what went wrong, so we have that feedback loop and allow us to do things better going forward. So if you don't have a process like this in place, or if it's a time to revisit your process, keep these key components and pieces in mind as you go through a capital management exercise.
Excellent. So, Vince,